Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Magnanimous Collective. I'm your host, Sean Kubota. Let's start it off with a deep breath into the belly. And let it go. Dropped in. Today is a different podcast. Well, today's podcast is in honor of my late grandfather, Morio Kubota, who I had on earlier this year. Last Thursday, he passed away. I was the one to give him the last dose of morphine. He was on hospice for 2 weeks. He had a UTI that I didn't think was going to be what brought him down, but it turns out that's actually something that brings down a lot of the elderly. And I tried really hard to save him. At the end of the day, I left work early. My aunt asked me to give him the last dose of morphine, and I was crying when I gave it to him because I knew it'd be the last one. And we all were around him when he took his last breath and transitioned and journeyed back home. I've taken the longest pause and step away from everything because of all this happening. And this is my first time really diving back into this space since then. And so there's a lot to talk about in regards to that, in regards to mourning, in regards to grief. I've talked about grief a lot on this pod in regards to how grief allows for humility and gratitude to come through. Because unless we are attached to grief or have grief online, we can't truly be humble and grateful in the moment, right? They just all are, coalescing and aligned. And yet what I've experiencing recently is that mourning is, these are words, so, we can reframe and attach different meanings to them. But mourning, mourning, and I guess you could say grieving too. But man, there is a process to that. Tell you what, to going through the feelings and the whole act of crying and breaking down and being so distraught and crying to the point where the back of your eyes feel like they're going to explode and your head hurts so much that you have to stop yourself. I find it really interesting as I've spent days crying and just absolutely crumbling and breaking down that, man, it's so interesting. What a cosmic joke. What a funny thing it is to be so sad and in so much pain and to be crying and to just be like, I can't even breathe right now because I'm so clogged up with all this slime, and I have to blow it out and I'm all messy and it's all over my face and I look all disheveled and my head hurts so much that I'm like crying and then it's like, ow, and it makes me have to stop. I find that really interesting because in those moments, it can be it's real. It's happening in real time, and we're feeling this mourning and we're feeling this grief. And in those moments, it feels like it's going to last forever. Those feelings are so rich and so potent and so present, prevalent in the psyche. They're fully embodied in the body that it just feels like, oh man, is this ever going to end? And then all of a sudden, the body is just like, oh shit, you got to blow your nose. You can't breathe, or your head hurts too much. You have to stop and breathe and chill the fuck out for a second. That doesn't mean that you won't go back in. I obviously did, but it is fascinating that the way that we're designed, our bodies just can't keep crying endlessly. The body exhausts itself. It gets to the place where we have our own death. in the sense of just like grieving and crying to the point where you literally cry yourself to sleep, or you literally have cried so much that you're so exhausted that your body just literally like knocks out. It's a very interesting, fascinating, funny, curious thing. And what's very important to note is that when we're feeling these things, it's important that we feel them. And it's also very important that we do our best not to attach stories and narratives as to why we're feeling what we're feeling, right? Like, oh, I'm feeling these things. How is this attached to my worth? Or what way can I judge myself because I'm feeling, or because I'm crying, or because I'm sad? Or no. Just the most, for one, we have to feel the thing. So the most important thing we can do is be honest with ourselves and genuine and allow for ourselves to feel. The other part is to, in the midst of that, be diligent, mindful, and have the awareness not to create a story or spin a story as to why we're feeling the things or what that can mean about us or so forth. Yeah, with all that being said, bringing it back to my grandfather, for those of you who watched that episode, for a lot of people, they said it was one of their favorite episodes of their favorite episode. To have a 99-year-old man share his wisdom, to have strength and, this drive, to share, to be funny and witty, and to leave us all with kind words at the end. I'm so grateful that I did that podcast. I'm so grateful that I did this created this thing. I'm grateful for my coach, Amari. I'm grateful for my family, for their support. I'm grateful that I've been able to get to this space so that I can have those memories eternalized. I'm grateful that I was able to get my grandma to come on last week before my grandpa passed, because I was like, man, I don't know where things are going to go after that. And I've been needing to get her on, but her schedule's a little bit more busy because she does dialysis and so forth. But anyways, it's not an excuse. But yeah, my grandfather was an incredible man. He, from being a poor farmer in Colorado, the son of immigrant farmers in Colorado, one of 9 children, he ended up taking over for his dad when he was a teenager because his dad didn't speak English, and he was just seeing him get taken advantage of by other, the buyers at market, because he didn't know better, and his dad was just trying to sell whatever he could sell. And my grandfather came in and was just like, you know what, I'm going to fucking take over, because he wanted to make sure that he could retire his mother and do good for the family. And, he was the shortest of all his brothers. And I got those genes. Those of you who know me know that I'm not the tall guy. And yet I'm the strong guy. I'm not to toot my own horn, but I'm a, pretty intelligent guy, maybe not in the sense of book smarts, but I could be, but an intellectual individual, and one who is able to connect with people, and one who's able to be liked and be able to be social and be brave and lead things. And I get that from my father and from my grandfather. He gets that from his father. It all stems back to my grandfather, who was a magnanimous individual, in the sense that not only he had the magnitude of being and just a guy who, as my grandma said, come on, take it in stride, a guy who just didn't feel sorry for himself and just kept pushing forward, and also was so forgiving, and also helped people, even helped people who maybe didn't deserve it or maybe had done him wrong in the past. He was literally he was emblematic of the very word that I chose to comprise this whole entire collective with, this the ethos of this brand. And I think it's something that I hope we would all strive to aspire to be. And it's not necessarily a destination. It's a consistent choice to show up in that way. It's a consistent choice to forgive. It's a choice to trust. It's a choice to have faith. It's a choice to be able to, in the moments where you may have every reason and right to be petty, to choose otherwise and to be the bigger person. That was Grandpa. And I owe everything to him and to my grandma and to my family. But my grandfather was he was my hero. Of all people that I can say, my grandfather was my hero. And he was a father figure to me. He raised me and my cousins and us kids when we were, my little brother, when we were younger, because our parents had full-time jobs. And I remember, playing sports with him, and he had worked up until he was 70, up until around when we were all born. And man, just a amazing, amazing guy, and so sweet and so loving to his wife. I can only, I used to see my grandfather and just be like, this is almost crazy how sweet he is, because my grandmother would be a little bit callous and rough and honestly, kind of bitchy, in the sense that she'd be like, oh, shut up. And he'd be like, oh, I love you, honey. You're my honey baby. Be like, yeah. But she loved him and he loved her, and he showed up for her so much. Like, he would massage her legs every night. He'd just wake up and massage her legs because she'd be restless. And I don't know, just such a devoted, loving husband. And I just, outside of his small quirks and certain things where I'd be like, oh, Grandpa, you maybe dial that back or take that too far or whatnot. He was the most honorable man I've ever met. There's so much of him that was just so good and so pure and so, man, so great. And, I got to respect him and aspire to be like him and have him as a father figure. And I also got to be his caregiver for a little over 2 years, which was beautiful. And I got to spend time with him, because I didn't spend time with my grandparents or my family when I was in college. Pretty much the whole time I was in Long Beach. So that was about 7 years. And then I left that place to come here to LA to be with family, because I recognized, you know what, this is actually more important. It's not going to last forever. And getting to caregive for my grandpa was beautiful. It was also very challenging. It was also like my grandparents became like my kids in a way, where you're having to make sure they're dressed, make sure they're bathed, do their teeth, brush their teeth, all the things, put in their dentures, whatever it is, take them out to eat, change them, all the things, and they also gave me, they would also drive me nuts too at times. And, my grandpa and my grandma would wake up in the middle of the night. I'm waking up, making sure they're okay. They're going to eat some snacks. I will absolutely miss that. My grandma's still doing it, but I will sorely miss that. I will sorely miss my grandfather eating bananas in the middle of the night. I could pretty much come over any night, and depending on the time, he might be up eating a banana or something. Man, I miss him. The whole time that he was in hospice, which was about 2 weeks, I was just I was missing him. And, when I found out what it was UTI, I was like, okay, I'm going to go see my brother in San Diego, because I thought oh, he'll get better. That's some easy antibiotics. I come back. We were only there for a day. I come back and it turns out that he's not eating and he's not doing good. I'm like, wait, what? I thought this would turn him around. He got discharged, which I disagreed with why they discharged him, because I had to literally lift him like he was a dead body. He was completely asleep, was not responsive, and had to lift him out of the car and get him in the wheelchair. I'm like, how would they discharge someone like this who's completely unresponsive, isn't eating, isn't awake? What? This person should obviously still be on IV, and then it turns out that he probably should have taken this other antibiotic. All this to be said, there were certain things that I was getting hey, we got to do this. We got to do this to save him. We got to do this to save him. And my aunt was like, honey, I think it might be his time. And I was just like, no, I didn't want to admit that. I didn't want to accept that. And slowly but surely, I was helping feed him, give him drink, but it just kept going downhill. And it got to the point where, it was too late. His body was shutting down and it seemed like it was his time. And, they didn't bring the antibiotics quick enough, and we should have done it the week before. The the right one. There's all this stuff that happened. And in that place of surrender, what I ended up realizing is that he was 99. He wanted to get to 100 and stuff, but like outside of me wanting him to stay so that he can meet my children and so that he could be at my wedding and he could do all the things, blah, blah. What does he have to look forward to, right? Like he spent 99 years, 73 years with his wife, meals every day, doing all the things, traveling all over the world. The one thing that is left for him to do is to die, is to transition and pass over to the other side, which is a weird thing to think about. For most of us, we're going to want to hold on to life as long as possible. But what about when you're at that space? And what if there's the potentiality of doing everything you can to save them, but it's like, and in any other circumstance, if it was a younger person, it'd be different. So it's like a mind fuck, because you're just in this space of wanting to save them, but then what is best for them, especially in the case of my grandfather, where he was able to have a beautiful, loving, gentle, peaceful, without struggle and pain passing. Like, what a gift. And yet, what a conundrum to wrap my head around, of wanting, like we were wanting his vitals to be okay, giving him oxygen, wanting him to be as comfortable as possible so that he can then pass, It's like it's a shift because it's no longer trying to make him better. Yeah, that was tough. That was really tough. And another thing that I had witnessed when he passed was that my grief and my mourning was not only for myself, but it was for everyone else. It was a romanticized pain of everyone else that I loved that loved him being in pain, and me allowing myself to feel that to the greatest depths. Like being so worried about telling my grandmother and her being absolutely destroyed. And when we told her, she was really sad and it was hard, but it actually wasn't as hard as it was in my mind that I had made it up to be for her. And I caused myself a lot of pain, and I'm not shaming myself for that. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I do find it interesting how in that space of grief, in that space of really feeling the depths of despair, I was also feeling into the fact that I was also creating a story around what might be felt by others and feeling sad for the pain of others, which I find interesting as I reflect on it, and find that just like most things, they're scarier, maybe sadder, maybe happier in our story of them or expectation of them. And the reality might not be as scary. It might be scarier, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it is interesting to witness that and be able to reflect on it afterwards and have all the parts of, thinking what it's going to be like and allowing for that to just drag you through the mud, and then to actually experience the thing, have it not be that bad, and reflect on it afterwards. Yeah. Yeah, with that being said, I miss my grandfather so much. And, the other day when I was thinking that I would do this pod, I was like, man, am I going to be able to keep it together? But if you can't tell from how I am and how I'm showing up, I'm pretty emotionally drained and exhausted, which maybe is a good thing because I can talk about these things and get through them. But I'm kind of in this space of somewhat numb, at least in that space, because it just went so far. So in either case, I'm glad to be able to share about it, because this is absolutely a first time thing for me. For one, to My grandfather's the closest of my nuclear family outside of my auntie Flo and my grandfather on my mom's side, but they were both like I didn't take care of them. They passed away when I was younger. I also wasn't raised by them. My grandfather was my father figure. He was my grandfather. He was my hero, and someone I admired to be and held in such high regard. And he was also like my child, so to speak. So it hit me really hard. I think it hit me and my aunt the hardest because we were the ones who were taking care of them the most. But I have nothing but great things to say about my grandfather, and I encourage you guys to watch the pod. I'll link it down below so you guys can check it out if you'd like. Yeah, fuck. Morio Kubota. What a legend. What a great man. And I'm so glad that I can share his love and his wisdom and his joy and happiness and his hilarity and humor and funniness. Yeah. And if there's something else that I would hope and wish for you guys to get out of this, it's to, like, truly, even if it's just for today, hug your loved ones just a bit tighter today. Especially the ones that maybe you don't see every day. Or maybe it's the one, maybe not just your partner, maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your grandparents, your uncle, your aunt, your cousin. Maybe let this be the opportunity to be the bigger person and be magnanimous and choose to forgive and be generous in the face of, them being a rival or an enemy at some point. Maybe it's the giving of a gift, a treaty, a truce, a gift of good faith and goodwill. Maybe it's just a call to say, hey, I'm sorry for how I showed up. I love you. Life's too short. I don't want to do this, right? And all that to be said, that's just my invitation and my encouragement, because ultimately we choose our stories. We choose to create misery so that we can grow and learn from it, or to allow for it to make us crumble and then wallow in despair for as long as we need to until we realize it's dumb. But that's my invitation, because even though I'd see my grandfather almost every day, I now wish that I would have just spent some time and not been in such a rush to do everything else I was doing, and just spend a little more time with him. Yeah, man. I'll always hear in my mind and in my heart, saying, "Love you, guy," and he'll be like, "Love you." Yeah. Be careful. He's just a sweet guy, and I'm about to be 35. He's been with me for, near 35 years, and him at 99. Honestly, I wasn't expecting him to go. And the interesting thing is, in the midst of that, I'm here, my family is planted here because of my grandmother and grandfather. My aunt and uncle, as soon as my grandma and grandfather transition, they're gonna probably move to Texas. My parents down to San Diego area, and I'd follow them down to San Diego. I'd love to go down there. And a part of me's wished and wanted to be able to go, but then I'm like, no, I gotta stay here. And it's kind of been like a pull and tug, I could live in a nicer place over there. It's cleaner, it's better, all these things, da da da. And then being like, oh, I'm stuck here. And that stuckness is a perspective, and it's a victimized perspective. In a sense, it's also somewhat real. I won't say that it's not real in a sense, but it does take me out of a space of finding the blessing in all of it. And in the midst of all of this stuff happening with my grandfather, I just wanted things to stay the same, and yet nothing stays the same. And I think I'm sharing this with all of you guys because I think it's on topic, it's on brand, it's important stuff to talk about. And a lot of the stuff that I talk about on the pod is very intellectual. I get very passionate. I'm about this stuff. I live and breathe it, and it's very important to me. And this type of stuff happens. And I've received a lot of love, and I've received a lot of blessings. I've received a lot of grace. And yeah, it's a first for me to have to allow for myself to truly have this much grace and just be with it, because it's life altering, it's exhausting, it's like crushing, and it's also making room for love. It's also making room for gratitude and all the things. Yeah. Trying to see if there's anything else I'd like to talk about it. I guess the one other thing that's on my mind is that, my grandfather passed at 12 p.m. We didn't have the mortuary come pick him up till 8 p.m. And, we've never had this happen before where, our family member dies at home, like home hospice, and we're able to be there. I knew my grandfather had passed because I smelled something, and, it's true that the bowels will release, and so we cleaned him up, and up until the first 1 to 2 hours, the body's still warm, and it still kind of feels like the presence is there or floating around or something like that. By hour 5, as the body starts to stiffen and get cold, I'm still there with my grandfather, and, we had people come over, and we had people have dinner, and I ordered dinner for everybody. It was actually a really good dinner. Bloodso's barbecue. But I was a wreck, and I couldn't be there and eat with the family for a long time. And I was just with him and being with him, because I'm like, this is the last time I'm going to see him like this. Like, him and my grandmother have choose to be embalmed, so there will be a viewing at the funeral, but if you know what happens in an embalming, that shit disturbs me, and it's not going to, it's going to be different, but I'll see him again, but it's going to be very different, and we're having the funeral a month later, so I don't want to be morbid, but the body's in refrigeration for that time. It's like a whole thing. But he's there, and I'm holding his hand, and sometimes I'm giving him hugs and just cradling his head, and it starts to feel less like I'm holding or cradling or hugging my grandfather, and more like I'm holding or hugging a dead body, That's very interesting in the sense that it becomes so apparent. It's yes, he used to inhabit that vessel, but what am I trying to say? The soul that brings life into the vessel, that allows for it to move and breathe and all these things, it's not that I've had this doubt, but it becomes so visually apparent. It becomes so visually, viscerally, emotionally, energetically apparent that the actual spirit and soul has left the body. Not that just the machine powers down. It's this very essence of being has now left and escaped this thing, and now this empty vessel thing is there. That was my grandpa for sure, but it doesn't feel like grandpa anymore, And all these things for me have been conceptual. They've been intellectual. I've, through my journeys and through meditation and all this stuff, it's a lot of this has been understood, and yet to witness it real time is a very different thing. And just reaffirms and validates, and it's whoa. Yeah. And so with that, I'd say that I'm very grateful to have been able to hold that space for my grandfather, to be able to take care of him in the ways that I have been able to. I feel honored to be around him in his last breaths, and be there with him and pray with him, and to give him that, that medicine where when she gave it to me, I was I'm pretty sure this is going to be the kicker, So yeah, that's that's what's alive, and that's what's on topic for this week for the Magnanimous Collective. We'll have more guest pods coming up. We'll have more solo pods coming up, but I felt like it was important to speak on Grandpa and who he was and how great he was. I just want to honor him in saying, Grandpa Morio Kubota, thank you for everything. Thank you for being a man in real life that I can learn from, that I can be loved by and love, that I can take care of, someone who can exemplify what taking care looks like, what loving someone looks like, what being an honorable husband looks like, an honorable partner, being patient, what hard work looks like, what discipline looks like, and what gaman and truly choosing to be the hero of the story and not be the victim, choosing to be magnanimous and choosing to forgive and be generous in the face of those that have potentially done you wrong or been a rival. Thank you for showing me how to be funny, how to be lighthearted, how to connect, how to be charismatic. I miss you every day. And I hope I do you proud. I love you, Grandpa. And with that, I'm going to bring it back to, I'm going to insert this clip at the end of my podcast with him. And I encourage you all to watch it in honor of him. And yeah, love the ones you love while they're here. Unless you want to create that misery story. And if you do, I honor you in doing so. But I can tell you, you can do a lot, and at the end of the day, you probably will wish you did more. So, with that said, here's the clip of me and Grandpa to end it out. Thank you, Grandpa, for coming on and sharing your wisdom and talking to the people. You want to give them a howdy doody goodbye?
Howdy doody, good luck, wish you a lot of happiness.
Thank you, Grandpa. Till next time, everybody.
Amen.
Okay, good. Let's get back to Grandma.